We're going to talk through what anxiety in kids can look like, and it can be very different depending on the kiddo. I'm using the term kid um, because I feel like when we say children, we're thinking of that 12 and under group, and when we say youth, we're thinking more like adolescents, the 12 and over group. So I'm just going to say kids, and that's going to capture all of them. And I will break things down by age a little bit, but you may hear me use the word kid or kiddo quite a bit just to kind of give that all encompassing um, term to what we're talking about. So we're going to talk about what anxiety can look like. We're going to work on really understanding the stress response, like what is going on internally for that kiddo and us that is creating this stress or anxiety response. Then we're going to spend time talking about ways that we can help an anxious child calm. And at the end, we'll do some resources, and there will be a lot of opportunity in and amongst these topics. We're going to be doing some polling, but I also invite you to use the chat. We're going to just proceed at a pace that we can, if there's things coming through chat, we're going to pause and spend time on those things. If you want to send a chat anonymously, I think you can send it just to me. So if you can find Monica in the list, I can't send one to myself, so I'm not on the list. But I should be on the list for you all. So if you have a burning question or something you'd like to share, but you want it to be anonymous, you can send it just to me. And when I read it out, I will not say your name. Okay. So first thing, what does anxiety look like in kids? Let me hear from you all. So again, in one word, or if you got to use more than one word, attach it with a punctuation mark or a dash or something. So let me hear from you all. In one word, what can anxiety look like in kids? They're distractible, they're acting out, they're angry, they're avoiding, irritable, there's tears, there's emotion. Oh, lots of stuff. They're bouncing, shaky, defiant, fearful, shutting down, ill, physical illness. They're resistant. They have stomach aches, nervous. They're misbehaving. A full spectrum, right? There's not one go-to like, oh, this kiddo is anxious and this is how I know. It can be a lot of different things. They shut down. I have an example from my own life. My son, who's now 21, when he was a kindergartner, so 5, 6 years old, he went through a period of time where every morning he had just these, what he reported as like stomach pain or stomach aches. And this went on, and we were like considering, is it a gluten thing? Is he lactose intolerant because of, of course, having milk with cereal in the morning? So this had gone on for a while, but was not a problem on non-school days. So I was like, there's something there. It's kind of like a puzzle you have to put together. And then there was one week that he experienced no physical symptoms, no stomach aches before school. And so after, it kind of dawned on me like, hey, he is not having any stomach pain, no complaints. we talked about, okay, what's different, Austin? Like, I'm thinking, is he being bullied and the student is like homesick this week, so not interacting with him? Like, what's going on? And what we discovered was that in his little kindergarten class, kids would go to different teachers for math. And one of the teachers, the one he was assigned to for math, had a tendency, according to my son, to like call kids out. So if they got the wrong answer or if they missed a problem or made a mistake, she would like call them out in front of the class. He never got called out in front of the class, but he was so nervous about it happening that that unconsciously for him exhibited itself as stomach pain. And we're going to talk about how that connection is made every morning before school until he knew that teacher was gone and he didn't have that to worry about. We would not have had a clue that that was happening. And I don't think he, at his little young age, would have had a clue that's why he was having the stomach aches. And so it can look like a lot of things and it can be hard to figure out like what is underneath this, what's going on, because it can be super subtle. I had my older son was really small for his age and was kind of bullied throughout middle school. And there was one kid that every morning would pick him up and hold him over the upper story ledge, like the balcony in the middle school. Why you would ever design a middle school like that, I don't know. Kids are just too, I don't know, unreliable at that age, right? So he would pick my son up and pretend like he was going to throw him over this balcony way down to the bottom floor. So every day, my son was having this kind of trepidation that he could get hurt that day, like literally be breaking bones, death, even. It was a big drop. And for him, it was very internalized and it came out more in the distractibility. Like he would just always have music going, he would always have noise around him. And that's kind of how he dealt with the fear, the anxiety of this happening, which of course we had no idea about until a bit further down the line. So sometimes it's definitely a puzzle what's going on. And sometimes there's nothing specific going on. It's just how they are reacting to life events. Okay. So let's break it down a little bit more. You guys really hit the nail on the head with your list of things. But if we break it down by age group, let's take a look at preschool age. Things we see in preschoolers that would indicate that they are struggling with anxiety could be things like decreased appetite, an increase in acting out behavior, stomach aches, night terrors, or not wanting to go to bed, being extra clingy, regression. So they might, if they've been, potty trained, they might go back to having accidents at night or even during the day. So you'll see a regression in developmental milestones, things that you're like, they were there, they were doing the thing, they had that down, and now they've gone kind of backwards. Okay, so that's preschool age. Elementary age, we'll see, some of these really overlap. Even for us as adults, when we're anxious, we can have appetite changes, meaning a decrease or increase in appetite. For elementary and complaining, what they're complaining about may or may not be related to the cause of the anxiety. It might just be kind of, general angst that they're experiencing, and it comes out as a lot of complaining. Or resistance and refusals. What looks like attention-seeking behavior. And what I like to think about whenever I'm working with a kid who is exhibiting like what we would call attention-seeking behavior, is just that reminder to myself that there is a function to their behavior. When kids' brains are not developed to the point where they're able to fully verbalize and express what's happening to them, it will come out in behaviors, or it will come out in those more physical complaints. Okay, they may isolate and withdraw from either caretakers, family, friends. You will see an increase in behavioral acting out. The physical symptoms, so headaches, stomach aches, muscle aches, or new or recurring fears that they are somehow communicating to you. Like, I don't want to do this. They may even be able to say that makes me nervous, or you will be able to pick it up because you notice them pulling away or fear, or they may be in your room at night. It could exhibit itself in a lot of different ways. And then we have our middle school age kiddos. Again, some of these are really going to overlap. Appetite changes, problems sleeping. That could be the desire to sleep a lot, or they are just not getting sleep, or they're not getting restful sleep. They're not, going through their full sleep cycle, so they feel rested. And it's so hard because these kids are also in all of these stages going through a lot of their own normal development. So some of this stuff could be anxiety. Some of this stuff could be like normal development, and some of it's going to be a combination. That's why parenting is hard, right? It's hard to figure it all out. And it can help to look at what is interrupting their ability to function, and how can we increase coping around that. So whether it's normal development or whether it's anxiety, if we kind of look at it with that approach, like what is interrupting their positive functioning or their ability to function, and how can we help them cope with those things? Okay, going on with middle school, maybe it might look like defiance, withdrawal and isolating again, those physical symptoms, emotional responses that may seem like really too much for the situation we're dealing with. So it might be something that to us as an adult seems like not that big of a deal. And here you have this kiddo with this extreme emotional response. And it's kind of like, whoa, what is that all about? So when you're experiencing that as the adult, something's going on with the kid. Nail biting. I worked with one kiddo who had a lot of school-based anxiety, and he would pull his eyebrows and eyelashes out. And the poor kid, then it just added to his anxiety because obviously he looked different and was getting teased. And so really a struggle. But those kind of anxious habits that you'll see them doing, picking on their skin, pulling out their hair, biting on their lip, biting their nails, a lot of habits that make us as adults, we may say like, get your fingers out of your mouth, or stop pulling out your hair, or whatever the case may be. And we're not looking at like what's underneath that. Personal story. I don't know if I've ever told this story like to a group, but I was a very anxious child. And I was a nail biter, or I just tore my nails off. Which I still struggle this with. I have a lot of like fidget toys to use, so I'm not, messing with my nails. And one day I had done this what I was so proud of, this little drawing thing in third grade. Remember the teacher, Mrs. Faber, third grade. And the drawing was like the cover of a book we were going through in class. And so I brought this drawing to her. And when she took it out of my hand, she saw my fingernails and she was like, "You need to stop biting your nails. No boy is ever going to want to hold your hand." And I was like, number one, Mrs. Faber, many boys have held my hand. So not an issue there. But as a third grader, that was devastating to me because that is how I dealt with anxiety, right? That was a calming thing. And I knew it wasn't great and I didn't like it, but I didn't know how to stop. And never was it a conversation about, gosh, you must be really anxious or worried or stressed about something. Let's talk about that. So that's my little personal third grade Monica nail biting story. Um, in middle school, we also may see self-harm, so cutting, burning. It can be the hair pulling. It can be like eraser rubbing. Um, so lots of versions of self-harm that come from anxiety. And then substance use. I mean, we all know we have elementary school kids that are using substances. Where we really see it growing is in that middle school age into high school, where it might start as a social fit in, have fun, whatever, and then quickly develop into, hey, I don't have to feel anything when I'm using these substances. So it's wonderful, right? Not thinking about the long-term impacts and consequences. Okay, and then we get to high school age, lots of sleep issues, lots of tiredness, physical tiredness. Anxiety can look like a lot of emotional reactivity, those emotional outbursts, lots of tears, um, lots of anger, like big emotions. Difficulty in concentrating, those physical symptoms again. You might see anger and aggression, isolation, withdrawal, substance use. And again, the self-destructive or self-harm, driving really fast, putting themselves in risky situations, not necessarily suicidal, but just as this coping with everything that's going on in their emotions. Okay. Any thoughts or comments on what anxiety looks like? And I didn't put a poll for this, so just in chat, what else are you seeing that I've missed in any age group of kiddos, what anxiety looks like? And you had a great list in that word cloud. So I think we may have captured a lot of it. All refusal to go to school. Yes, lots of truancy. That was early in my first job ever out of grad school. I worked for a Department of Juvenile Justice, and truancy was the thing. Talk about a frustrating area to try to help kids and parents get through. And you are so right. At the core of a lot of truancy, I will not say all, but a lot of truancy is anxiety. And it it may not be specific anxiety for school, for academics. It might be social anxiety. It could be a lot of different things. So if you're working with truant kiddos, keep that in mind. Not wanting to leave their parent. Yes. So separation anxiety. So you're going to see that clinginess, especially in the younger kids. Although I have teenagers I work with that are like, it reminds me of like a little duck or a chicken, and they have all their babies following them. I have a family, there's a couple teenagers, and they are an anxious family. And those teenagers are like right there with their mama duck, and they don't leave her side. Always checking in. Lots of history there with that family. So separation anxiety, not wanting to leave their parent. It's a good one. Anything else we missed on how anxiety looks like, what anxiety looks like in our kids? Okay, let's keep going. So what are the causes? Why are our kids anxious? And I talked through a couple of scenarios about what can cause anxiety. But when and again, I'll just break it down a little bit by age group. So when we look at adolescents, typical causes of anxiety for them are school. That's pretty broad, can be the academic portion, can be a specific class. It can be the routine, the schedule, around too many people. It can be a lot of things. Peer pressure, that need and want and desire to fit in, relationship struggles, social media, and all that comes with that. That's its own webinar, right? Difficult life circumstances. So think about if they're having to move, if there's instability in the home setting, if there's domestic violence, divorce, if they have siblings who have unique challenges. So it can be a lot of different things that impacts their world. Future decisions are on their mind, especially as they get into that upper high school age. And then just the ongoing changes in their body, huge, fast changes in their body, which is also means huge, fast changes in brain development and emotions. And it's hard to understand what's happening when all of those changes are going on. So what else? What else are potential causes of anxiety in adolescence? You can go ahead and text that in. Does not have to be one word. It can be a phrase. So what have we missed? Causes of anxiety in adolescence. And sometimes we think of yourself. Think of yourself when you were a teenager. What caused you anxiety? So we have peer pressure, social norm pressure, body image. Ooh, that's a good one. I should add that to that list. Being perfect, pressure from parents. Yes. The unknown, huge. Social media, being included or left out, feeling unheard, sometimes even not being able to express what's going on. Like, yeah, something's going on, and somebody may be saying what's wrong, and I don't know. I don't know what's wrong, and I don't know how to say it. Homelessness, parent expectations, sometimes coach, teacher expectations. We have to be really careful about that, don't we? Climate change and the future. Yes. And I have kids that just the political climate that's so charged they pick up on and have a lot of anxiety around what does this mean for our future? Addiction, substance use causes anxiety, and it's often used as like self-medicating for anxiety as well. Lack of connection, isolation. Good list. Extended breaks from school. Interesting. Um, because during COVID, a lot of kids felt some anxiety because they were lacking their connections and maybe things weren't great in the home. But many, many kids reported that that was like the best few months of their school career, especially those kids who struggled in school or were bullies or didn't fit in to the social norm. They loved it. And also interesting is when I do QPR trainings, um, they release like data. And during the COVID year, 2020, suicides in this country dipped and then went right back up in 2021. So very interesting. And I do think a lot of it is that the expectations and the pressure that we put on our kids and ourselves. So fear of something happening at school, absolutely. That's a good one too, in light of school shootings, comparing lives to their friends. Good list, you guys. We had a couple things in chat that are very interesting. How much of anxiety is genetic? And is it genetic or generational? And there are a lot of differing views and research, right, on the where anxiety comes from, what is like the root cause. And it, I believe, is a mix of, genetics and environment. So we are genetically predisposed to certain things. And also we live in an environment that potentially exacerbates or expands on that genetic predisposition. With low genetic predisposition to certain things like anxiety or depression or even psychosis, typically the stressors causing it would be pretty high. If genetic predisposition is high, you do not need much for a stressor for it to kick in. So like definitely in my family, we have anxiety that you just know. I mean, you could see it throughout the generations. People have been treated for it, uh, a couple generations back, kind of when they actually started treating it. So interesting question, and I really think it's a mix. Also, our kids pick up, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, how we cope with stressors and anxiety. If we're a very nervous person, our kids pick that up, and they often will mimic our coping. And so the importance for us to kind of get a handle on how we deal with stressors and how we manage anxiety is a really important piece of helping our kids manage anxiety and cope. So yeah, the environmental versus genetic question, fascinating. And I think it's a mix. And if we have anybody on here that has other good information on that, feel free to chime in. Okay, then let's look at children. So think of these as our young ones. Causes of anxiety, it's that loss or death, really around that fear of my support people are not going to be there for me. Violence, the fear of violence happening around them, especially if they've had some exposure, abuse, frequent moves, illnesses, school-related issues. And, this age, they lack the ability because of brain development to really verbalize where their fear is coming from, which can be a real source of frustration when you're trying to help them. And so just watch, their clues to you are going to be through their behavior and tracking behavior. Like, does it have a pattern? Is it a certain time of day, a certain time of year, certain days of the week? Like, what is the pattern? Is their behavior related to anxiety? Are the symptoms big when they're around certain people or a certain person? That's part of the putting the puzzle together, is watching for trends in how their anxiety comes out and when. So it may even be a little bit of tracking. And sometimes that's not bad for us to do either. If we are struggling with anxiety and we have a hard time like pinning it down, like why am I anxious today? Why is my heart beating faster? Why am I snappy? Why am I having a stomach ache? All these things. Sometimes it's helpful for us to track that as well and look at any patterns that might exist. Okay. So what have we missed with the little kiddos? Anxiety with our young ones. What was not on the list that you are seeing or dealing with? Causes of anxiety in our little ones. And again, this does not have to be one word. It can be a phrase. Lack of structure. Big one. Dual household. So that back and forth, again, it kind of plays into the lack of structure and stability. Daily changes he was not suspecting. Lack of structure and stability, right? Bathroom issues, and that can be both a symptom of anxiety and a cause of anxiety. Poor diet, change in routine, not picking up on triggers, sensory issues. Yeah, good. You guys really hit hard on some of what we're going to talk about around stability and structure for kids, in terms of helping them with their anxiety, new experiences. Good. Any more on this one? Okay. So we're going to spend some time understanding what's going on when someone is experiencing stress. So I'm kind of using stress and anxiety a bit interchangeably here through this discussion. So when we experience a stress response, it's important to know that it is automatic. It is automatic, and we don't always get ahead of it before it can take us in an unhelpful direction. So, was talking about, let's walk it through a little bit. So let's say there is a stressful incident that happens. So I'm just going to use my son's example about being in the classroom and experiencing the teacher calling out a student, which has caused them a lot of embarrassment. Okay. Now, the thing about the stressful incident is it doesn't even have to actually be something that's happened. It can be something that they're worried about happening. So they're thinking about it. They might be kind of obsessing on it, and they're playing this out in their mind that this stressful, bad thing is happening. And their brain does not, our brains do not differentiate between this is a stressor that's actually happening or this is something I'm worried about happening. Either way, we feel it. Like either way, our brain responds to it like it's happening now, whether or not it's happening now. So we have that stressful incident either perceived or happening in the present. The information is immediately sent to the amygdala, which is a little almond-sized piece of our brain. And that is where we store history, we store emotions. And so if we're relating this to something in the past that has not gone well, then the danger signal gets sent out. And this can be a lot of different things. I don't know if any of you have read the book, What Happened to You. That's the, I've got it on my shelf. That's why I'm looking. I think it's Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah. Such a good book. I listened to it as an Audible book, and then I bought it because I knew it was a book I needed to really mark up and highlight and dog ear and all the good things. So one of the stories that they tell in this book is about a kiddo who really disruptive childhood from a young age on, lack of stability, lack of structure, lack of consistent caregivers. So there was also abuse, neglect. So this kiddo had been through a lot. He was at the time in a pretty stable foster home and started a new school and was doing well. He was academically performing. He was regulated emotionally until he got a new teacher, and the teacher was a male. And he became completely dysregulated, destroyed the room, could not, there was like no incident, there was no, I don't know the word I'm looking for, precipitating event that caused this eruption in dysregulation. And the Dr. Bruce Perry was brought in to kind of work with this kiddo. Well, through this process, he sat in on a supervised visitation with the kiddo and the kid's dad. And so he was kind of able to view the inner workings of that relationship, not healthy. He also fast forward months down the road, when the kid starts having problems in school, he was called in to sit with and observe and have a meeting between the teacher and the kid. The first thing he noticed was the teacher wore the same cologne or aftershave as the dad. That kiddo's stress response, really trauma response, came out of the amygdala picking up that scent. And that scent in his mind was attached to danger. And that kid did not have the ability to differentiate, like, oh, this is my teacher that's carrying this scent. This is not my dad that's carrying this scent. I'm still safe. It is automatic. So the information stored in that little almond shaped sized piece of our brain, the amygdala, is critical when we look at the stress response because it's based on our history. So if you as an adult have been assaulted by someone wearing a red hat, or if I have a client who um, was driving on icy roads and was in a bad accident on this one intersection. Every time you see a red hat, that amygdala is going to send out a danger signal like, oh my gosh, it's connecting the red hat to the assault. Every time that guy comes upon that intersection or any intersection that resembles that one, he has this automatic stress response because in his amygdala, it's attached to danger, accident. Okay. So you're kind of getting the automatic part of these responses. So from the amygdala, the danger signal goes to the hypothalamus, which really then sends it out. And it's the control center for the rest of our body through our nervous system. And then a number of things happen. Our adrenaline surges, our heart beats faster, our pulse rate and blood pressure go up, our breathing becomes rapid and often very shallow. Our senses become really sharp, so we're kind of very in tune to what's going on around us. And our body releases glucose and fats to supply energy. This is a life-saving response. The reason it's life-saving, it's because it allows us to not have to think and process in times of like life or death danger. You'll notice in all those bullet points, thinking is not present. So that's great when we are in a situation where like we're out in the woods being chased by a bear. We don't have to stop and think through our options, I hope. Usually we just know we've got to run or we're going to drop and play dead, freeze, right? Or sometimes fight. Depends on the animal, I guess, and the situation. But we don't have to think that through. We just act. Life-saving process. Thank God we have. However, in our normal daily lives, most of the stress we encounter is not life or death. But does our brain know the difference? No. It sends us into the stress response. We typically choose unconsciously either fight, flight, freeze, or fawn reaction. I don't have fawn on here. Fawn is when you're feeling stress and anxiety, and your go-to reaction, your unconscious reaction, is to make everything okay for everyone around you. Like that fawning response, like, it's okay, I've got this, I can fix this, I'll do this. I see that a lot with kids. And I see a lot in like domestic violence situations where it's in a relationship, it's the victim typically who is like super hyper alert to the reactions and responses of their abuser. And when they're picking up on something like look of the eye or the way they're walking or their tone of voice, it can be any little thing, they go into fawn mode where it's like, I'm going to quickly try to make everything okay so it doesn't get worse. So this all happens in an immediate response. After the perceived threat is gone, it typically takes like 20 to 60 minutes to return to normal levels where heartbeat is normal, blood pressure, pulse are normal, breathing returns to normal. We kind of let down our guard. Now, for some kids, they never feel like the threat is gone. So they are always in a state of a lot of like hypervigilance, completely wearing on them. Their brain is always in this stress response mode, always being ready to fight, flight, freeze, fawn, constantly scoping for danger signals. And they never have the opportunity to just be like, okay, that animal's no longer chasing me. I can be calm now. Okay. So when you have a kid, like let's say they have separation anxiety and you're saying, oh, mom's going to go out with some friends for the evening, and immediately they're like at your leg crying, don't go, my stomach hurts, don't go. Um, just know that this has all kicked in and there's something that's in their mind connecting you being gone with a danger to them. Okay, hopefully that all makes sense. Really fascinating. And it helps so much to look at it from a brain perspective versus a behavior perspective. Because behavior, it's harder to like, oh, we have to stop this. You have to follow the rules. You have to get back on track. And it's like, no, let's think about what's going on in their brain right now. And how can we help that brain relax and calm? Okay. Question for you. And this is a polling question. And whoops. Did I skip one? Just a sec. Okay. My slides are a little glitchy. Okay. This question is, how much do you know about the vagus nerve? So this is just a little poll to help me. So A would be a lot, and just text in whichever letter. B would be some. C would be I've heard of it. And D is I have no idea what you're talking about. Are we going to Vegas? Which would be a no, but. Okay, we'll let these numbers tick in a little bit. This is fairly new information for me too. I've kind of dug into this pretty recently. And I think there's a lot of research and studies coming out around this, but I think it's really fascinating. And I think it's important for us to get a handle on some kind of knowledge about it when we're helping kids that are anxious. Okay, so it looks like our numbers have kind of ticked in. So 4% of you feel like, hey, I know a lot about the vagus nerve. Feel free, you 4% or anybody, to add to this conversation in chat. 56% know some, 37% have heard of it, and 4% are like, no clue. So let's talk about the vagus nerve. Spelled a little different than Vegas, like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Pronounced the same. So the vagus nerve connects so many pieces of our body, starting at the brain stem all the way down to the esophagus and throat, the lungs, the heart, the liver, the stomach, spleen, GI tract, all connected. It is like the brain body connection through this nerve, or sometimes it's referred to as like a system of nerves, the vagal system of nerves. It's fascinating to understand because this is exactly why when we are experiencing anxiety, we feel like our throat is closing off. Or when we are experiencing anxiety, our stomach hurts. Or it's hard to breathe, or our heart beats faster. It's like this is the tie-in between our emotions, our brain, and our body. And it's automatic. So I just have a few slides on kind of quotes from a article in Psychology Today on the vagus nerve. And it's talking about the role of that nerve or system of nerves with emotional regulation. And this is not just kids, this is all of us. But it helps to understand this when we're working with kiddos. So vagus means wandering. And the vagus nerve, after it leaves the base of the brain, it sends branches to the ears, the throat, the heart, the lungs, and the digestive tract, with stops along the way at the vocal cords and the diaphragm before descending into the abdomen. And if you think about just for a moment, what are your symptoms of anxiety? And how does it play into the vagus nerve? Like, I'll feel my heart beating faster. Um, I will realize that I'm breathing more shallowly, stomach ache. My dad, whenever I talk to him, I can tell if he's anxious because his voice is so tight and he's always clearing his throat. So that's one of his responses to anxiety and stress, is this tightening of his throat. Okay. It is the duty of the vagus nerve to orchestrate bodily responses to keep you safe or warn you about danger before you even have a chance to think about it. So it is like how the stress response carries out. Without your awareness, the brain scans the environment for cues of danger, pitching you into high alert to fight or flee, or an extreme situation, shutting you down. It also scans for cues of safety, which allow you enough calm to open you up to socially engage with others. So it not only senses danger, it senses safety. And then your body can respond to that sense of safe environment. Okay. I noticed that in my notation, I spelled Vegas wrong on like every slide. So it is VAGUS. Because information flows both to and from the brain via vagal pathways, the vagus nerve can be thought of as a major mind-body highway. There's no separating it. And we need to understand that we are one. There's no separating. Through the vagus nerve, you react to signals in your environment in ways that calm, alarm, or dysregulate the body. And these states in turn create emotional experience and play out in behavior, especially in kids who lack the ability to really process and verbalize what's happening to them. Okay, one more. The vagus nerve is why your heart races and stomach curdles when you sense a threat, and why your breathing slows and your body relaxes when friends welcome you to their house. So it's both. It reads the environment, it reads for danger, but it also reads for comfort. And if you, in your mind, if you think of a time from your childhood that was especially comforting for you, like sometimes I'll have a memory of being at my grandparents' house for Christmas, or I'll see a picture of a toy I had when I was a child that's, was a positive, good thing. And I will get like chills down my spine, or I'll have this physical reaction of kind of warmth. That is also the vagus nerve. Any comments or questions before we get into creating calm for our kids? Any questions, comments on the vagus nerve? Okay, let's keep going. Let's talk about creating calm. So one way to create calm is to stimulate the vagus nerve, which seems a little bit backwards because mentally think of stimulate as like the opposite of calm, right? But when we stimulate the vagus nerve, it's like we're kind of getting control of it. We're adding things that help calm it. Okay? There are interesting ways to stimulate the vagus nerve, and I encourage all of you, if this is kind of interesting for you, do some more digging on this. Is that there's more and more info coming out all the time. But stimulating the vagus nerve, a lot of it is like cross body motion, which we'll talk about next. Some of it is repetitive motion or things that stimulate the senses. So chewing gum, singing or humming, slow, deep breaths, which I'm sure, all familiar with, box breathing, eating a piece of dark chocolate. I swear I did not make that up. That was in the information. Gargling with water, splashing cold water on our face are all ways to stimulate the vagus nerve and calm. Now, when you're working with an anxious kid and you're trying to help them calm, I wouldn't be like, do all the things. Here's a piece of gum. Let's hum, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Take some slow, deep breaths. Oh, here's chocolate. Get your face in the water. Like, just pick one. Just pick one. Make sure you are regulated, which we'll talk about a little bit, and see if there's an impact with that one thing. And there might not be. Oh, interesting. Melissa just put in chat because our little boy is obsessed with chewing gum. I wonder if it helps him and don't even realize it. Okay, a recent news story about using sour candy as a way to combat anxiety and panic attacks because it's distracting, right? It pulls your senses in when you're getting that taste of sour. Interesting. Okay, here's some more. Breathing. So breathing exercises. Sometimes kids, it's hard for them to formulate like the box breathing. It's too kind of out there and abstract. They need something more visual. So it can be blowing bubbles. Make sure they're doing it slow, like say blow slow and create the biggest bubble you can. So blowing into a pinwheel, and then of course the box breathing. But the goal is to help them, whether it's through counting or ABCs or watching the second hand on a clock, is just do it slowly. Because if they're in anxiety mode, they're going to be breathing shallowly and quickly. So oxygen's not getting to their brain to help them calm. Okay, here we have the crossing the midline. And you guys, this is so fascinating because I presented to a couple groups of kiddos it was at there was two school districts and then it was like an egg safety day. And we talked about anxiety and calming. And I would have them do exercises like march in place. And while you're marching, put your opposite hand on your opposite knee, right? The kids throughout the presentation that were the most dysregulated, so they were interrupting, they were unable to sit still, they were bothering their peers. When it came to doing this activity, they struggled. They were touching, it was all symmetrical. Like they were touching right hand to right knee, left hand to left knee. There was no cross body. And it took like them really intentionally looking at someone else doing it or me standing in front of them doing it before they got it. So there is something um, to that, stimulating the vagus nerve by doing cross body motion. And you can do it like the marching, touching shoulders, cross body. If they're sitting at a desk, tapping their toes, kind of crossing their ankles, wiping the table. You can get some chores out of them while they're working on calming, right? Wipe the table this way, wipe the table this way. Walking in a figure eight. So it's crossbody tracing a figure eight with their finger. Okay, so all the crossing of the midline. In one of my youth presentations, I had a teacher who actually started the day doing some midline, crossing the midline activities prior to getting into the day. So they would just, walk in a circle eight, or they would march and touch their opposite knee, something that stimulated the vagus nerve to help create calm. Some other techniques to create calm, and this is also helpful with the vagus nerve. It's kind of a similar thought to the weighted blanket creating calm. It's like the muscles and the resistance. So doing like wall push-ups, carrying a backpack that's got some weight, and maybe you don't carry it on your back, maybe you carry it up front. Things like pushing a vacuum or pulling a wagon that's got some weight to it. So somehow using muscles. So if you have an anxious, dysregulated kid, physical activity is going to be really important for them. But to do it in a way that's a bit controlled and intentional is helpful. So think about like resistance, weight, as a way to help create calm. And then the processing piece of this, right? The time to do this is not when they're in a state of anxiety. I think about intervening with kids in terms of like a bell curve, okay? The time to intervene is when you are sensing that they're heading into emotional dysregulation, or after the fact. When they're in the peak of that bell curve, then it's about helping them cope, helping them calm, keeping them safe. Their brain is not in a place where they are going to be able to process. Not because they don't want to, not because they're being defiant or disrespectful. It's because they're in that stress response mode. And remember, thinking and processing, not on the list. So your time to intervene with them in terms of processing is going to be ideally when you first see signs of something coming on or after they've calmed. And then it's just helping them understand like what happened there, talk through it, what were they feeling internally? What was their response? Fight, flight, freeze, helping them understand that. And then talking through better coping strategies. Like when you first feel these things happening, when you first feel your fist clenching or your throat tightening or your stomach having butterflies, let's do this. Like right away, let's do this to try like calm ourselves. I had one little girl at one of those trainings. It was the cutest thing ever. And she said, well, in the mornings before I go to school, mom helps me put like lavender essential oils on my wrists and my neck and like her, pulse points. And that was calming for her. It can be a lot of different things. which brings us to the next one is tuning into the five senses. And that's good for us and our kids, right? Again, not necessarily in the heat of things because it's hard to focus in, but prior to getting into intense emotional dysregulation, it can be helpful to calm, to just say, okay, we're just going to take a few moments and tell me or think about, what are you seeing right now? What colors are you seeing? What shapes are you seeing? What textures are you seeing? What movement are you seeing? Spend a few moments on sight. Then move to hearing. Close your eyes. Tell me, what are you hearing right now? And then go to touch, and then go to taste, and then go to smell. Um, so we had a comment in chat that says, I've noticed a lot of positive feedback with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with youth and adults. Now, this person probably wants to remain anonymous because it went right to me. But if I'm understanding it right, and tell me if I'm not, it's like 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you touch. Okay. So it's the same kind of concept, running through your senses, but kind of assigning a number to each one, which would add additional. So now I also need to keep track of how many I've already named. Okay, that's good. Making a plan, especially with older kids, but even younger ones. I know when my kiddos were stressed or anxious about something and their emotions were big. You know, I, as the parent, wanted to, of course, get to the other side of the emotions and problem solve. But I knew I needed to hear them out, let them process, let them know I heard, not downplay, not judge. And then when they were kind of at the end of the big emotions and the processing, I would say to them, okay, let's make a plan for how we're going to deal with this. And that helps get the thinking, processing part of your brain turned back on from the amygdala and the emotions firing. So making a plan, like, how can we deal with this? How can we cope? And then, make it simple. Maybe like, let's just try this. Let's just try this one coping strategy. Maybe it's deep breathing. Maybe it's how to handle a situation with peers. Maybe it's how to handle feeling like they're going to have a panic attack in class. Like, what do we do when we first feel it coming? There is a lot of comfort in having a plan. And sometimes you have to write the plan down. Sometimes you may have to draw a visual of what the plan is. Sometimes you have to just talk through it. So keep in mind, what is your kids' learning style? Are they auditory learners? Are they visual learners? Do they need the combo? Can they read it just in writing and it's enough? Do they need to see a picture? So take that into account too when you're helping them develop some coping strategies. Humor is always good. Be careful about this because humor can also cause them to feel like you're making fun of them or you're downplaying the seriousness. But sometimes you could even like role play a fight, flight, freeze response to normalize it and kind of use humor along with that. That can be helpful. You've got to know your kid to know how to use the humor. And then reflecting back on what's working, what's not working. Like, what are they getting and what have they grasped onto and what really did not resonate with them in these coping strategies we've talked about. Okay. So less helpful, as you know, as our emotions elevate in response to their elevating emotions, not helpful. Then we're both in that stress response and nobody's thinking rationally or clearly or problem solving. We're all living from the amygdala, right? So it's super important that you also work on your calm. What do you need to do to calm, to help them calm? Telling them to calm down or stop crying assumes that they have that capability in the heat of a stress response, in the midst of it, which typically they do not. And I'll tell you a story about another client I have, and she's 20. And when I first started meeting with her, we were just like very new, maybe session number 2 or maybe 3. And during that time, I was like, wow, I wonder, like I was having this thought, um, like she says her goals are to manage stress, but she seems to really have it together. So just in the back of my mind, I was like, really interesting that she's seeking counseling. And this was virtual. I think on session number 3, her relationship of 4 years with her boyfriend ended. Um, in a pretty abrupt manner, even though it sounded like it was a good change, it was a big change. She immediately upon talking about it showed emotion. Like there were tears, her eyes turned red, her voice became shaky, and then just like that, it was shut off. And she was like, well, I just know this is better for my future and move on. And I just kind of took note of it. I didn't push it then. But then a few sessions later happened again. And this time it was, I don't know, something with a grandparent and tears and then shut off. And I was like, okay, we're going to talk about this. And she shared that when she was a child, showing emotion, especially crying or anger, was not accepted. And she was told to stop, to get her act together, to quit acting like a baby. And she learned. She learned how to shut it down immediately. So just now at the age of 20, she is learning that when she is experiencing emotional or physical pain, it's okay for her to have a cry. It's okay for her to express that pain. And she had never been allowed to do that. So we have to be careful. And how that came out for her was major control and perfectionism. So, like, she was always hyper vigilant to keep her act together because she equated having an emotional response as weakness, a lack of control, lack of power, and unacceptable. So, not helpful to tell our kids to basically stuff your emotions, but no, they're going to come out later through substance use, through perfectionism, through suicide attempts, through physical illness. So, helping them work through it and cope is the way to go. And then just another note on what's less helpful is think about what's less helpful for you. So when you're in a state of anxiety or worry or overwhelm, what's not helpful for you that other people do? And make sure that we're not doing those same things for our kids. Okay. I just love this quote. When little people are overwhelmed by big emotions, it's our job to share our calm, not join their chaos. And that really speaks to the comments in the one poll around structure and stability and routine. Structure, stability, routine. to help kids who are anxious. Okay, here's a poll. Go ahead and share additional strategies that you have learned that help kids calm. I love it when we can learn from each other. Um, and this obviously does not have to be one word. So additional strategies that you have learned that help kids calm. Meeting basic needs. Huge, like the foundation, right? If you think of Maslow's hierarchy, that foundation has got to be there. Taking brain breaks, coloring and drawing, physical touch, fidget toys. And again, for some kids, they might repel physical touch and just know that there's a history there somewhere, that the amygdala is telling them physical touch equates potential danger. So touching them can throw them into anxiety. Let them talk freely. Swing. Pet therapy. Amazing what a furry friend can do for a child that's anxious. I love that. Getting outside, that movement, quiet time. Some kids really can't handle a stimulated environment. So that's awfully hard in a classroom where there's other kids and there's noise and there's things on the walls. So just be aware. Utilizing the I feel or I see that you are upset or worried. And you can even tell them what you're seeing that leads you to the conclusion that they're upset or worried. So you can say, I see you tearing your fingernails off. And a lot of times that means a person's upset or worried. And I'm wondering if you're feeling that way. Or I see you scratching yourself, pulling out your hair, whatever the case is. I see you, or I hear you, or I notice you, not in a disciplinary way, but you're just letting them know what you're observing. And then you're connecting that thing to, a lot of times when people do that, it's because they're feeling worried about something or they're feeling afraid or anxious. And I'm just wondering if you're feeling that way. See if that opens up some dialogue. But for sure, it at least helps them connect that you are noticing, that you're caring, that you're there for them, that you're a stable force, and that what they're exhibiting is tied to a feeling that maybe they have not identified. Calming music, dim lights. I know for some kids, they sleep. I sleep to like calm. I do sleep stories, but there's also the soundscape. So they have the calming noise of, a river or raindrops or waves or whatever it may be. Okay, awesome list. Thank you for that. Okay. This is just to my slide, and I've said this throughout the presentation. Be sure that you are helping you create your calm. Because like I said, a lot of times our kids, they will pick up in their environment the stressors, the anxiety, the fear, and then they will exhibit it and take it in and cope with it the best they know how. And most of the time they don't know how. So it comes out as all those things we listed in the beginning: disengagement, withdrawal, acting out, physical aches and pains, all the things, distractibility. So it's important that we look at us, like as parents, as people who are caring for children in whatever capacity, are we okay? Are we able to handle our anxiety and to create our calm? So some last tips um, for us as adults and for our kiddos is don't overschedule. There's so many good things out there for kids to be involved in that really, we don't want them to miss opportunities. We want them to have rich um, experiences, but it's okay to have downtime and time at home. It's more than okay. So just be careful about your schedule personally and how that's maybe adding to your anxiety and spilling over into the anxiety of the family, but also don't overschedule your kids. Help them make choices about what's important. Like we need to choose between these two things. We're just not going to do them both. And maybe you as the parent needs to make that decision, and that's okay. Ensure the right amount of sleep. Someone mentioned that in the poll. Critical, critical, critical for adults and kids. It's like the foundation of the foundation. If we're not getting sleep, um, the rest of our world is not going to be great, especially if it's ongoing. We could probably all roll with a night or two of not good sleep. Little tougher to roll ongoing. So getting your kids to bed, controlling those electronics, the use of them at night. Um, I have my kids are in their early 20s, and if I wake up to a Snapchat that came at like 2 in the morning, I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Nothing good happens at 2 in the morning and you should be sleeping. So it's important for all of us to get the sleep we need. Healthy food. This plays into it, the sugars, not a dietitian, not a nutritionist, but use good judgment with food. What are our kids eating? That could be hurting them, or what are we eating? That could be, not helping us with our anxiety. I talked to one of my clients, an adult male, the other day, and he was sharing that for years and years and years, he has struggled with restless legs at night to the point that they are bad before he goes to sleep. He falls asleep. He wakes up, they're restless, can't get back to sleep. I mean, it's majorly impacted his functioning for years. He's also a dairy farmer who loves ice cream, support dairy. And so every night before bed, he would have a great big bowl of ice cream. Habit for years, daily habit for years. He stopped the ice cream and the restless legs stopped and his sleep improved 100%. So just think about, basic needs, eating, sleeping, hydration. How is that, or how could that be playing in to anxiety and stress? We've talked about working in the physical movement and exercise. This is for us as parents and caregivers. How do we model self-care? How do we model problem solving? So when something upsets us, how do we work through that? How do we model using good coping strategies? Doesn't mean we're perfect, still means we deal with hard things, but how can we do a better job of modeling for them, which ultimately means we're doing a better job for us as well. And then, as we've talked about throughout the presentation, stability, structure, and consistency are so key to helping with anxiety in kids. It doesn't mean, there is definitely something to be said for exposure with anxiety, right? but we can expose with good, solid coping strategies. But overall, kids will thrive in environments that are stable, they're structured, and they're consistent. I had kids when the first 10 years of my career, I was a school-based mental health counselor. And it was a district that was a lot of poverty. I mean, if you were to look at our free and reduced lunch numbers, I would guess in the 80s to 90% of the kids were free and reduced lunch. And one of the consistent happenings for many of these kids who struggled was they didn't know where they were going after school on any given day. They didn't know who was going to be there on any given day or what would be going on. And so imagine every day, am I going to be going home? Am I going to be going somewhere where my primary caretaker is or not? Am I going to be going somewhere where there's going to be food to eat because I'm going to be starving hungry when I get off the bus? I probably know I'm not going to have the supplies I need to get the homework done that the teacher just told us we needed to do. Um, I don't know if I'm going to have clothes for school tomorrow at this place that I'm going tonight. Pretty tough to function, right? So that stability, structure, and routine, super important. If you're working with kids that don't have that, do your best to provide it. So maybe they know, like, there's breakfast at school now. So I don't have to worry if I'm in a place where there's not food. I'm going to get to school and make sure there's time for them to eat. And if there's not adequate time, help develop that so they're not worried about having a choice between eating and getting to class on time. Do they know that you as counselor or a therapist or school-based person has like a closet of clothes that they wouldn't be embarrassed to wear to school in case they had to come to school wearing the same thing they wore the day before, and it might not be the cleanest? Do they know that there's a place that they can sit and do homework when they did not have the ability to finish it at home the night before? So we don't have control over the home environments. I know some of you are parents, but if you're working with kids, what you do have control over is how you offer them stability, structure, and consistency. Okay, any questions or comments on reducing stress and developing positive coping section? Okay. Resources. North Dakota, I'm sure you are all familiar, have wonderful resources through Parents Lead. Really awesome tools that you can download or access at no cost. So I encourage you all to check out, it's parentslead.org. This is an app. So if you're using it for kids, you know, totally, I never talk to kids about apps without talking to their parents first, because parents should have a say, right? They're probably paying for the phone and they're the parent. But this is an app that I would say for youth would be good. Maybe your 10 to 11-year-old, if they have a phone and they use it, or you would sit down with them and do it, preferably. For sure for adults. And this app has breathing exercises, helps you kind of track how you feel. And it's a tracking app too, where it'll guide you through breathing exercises. And then, like, did that help? Did that not help? Maybe try a different one if it doesn't help. So breathe to relax. Another app I really like, and this would be definitely for like the older teenagers and adults, is the mindfulness coach. And there's tools on there for reducing stress, coping with unpleasant thoughts and emotions, meditation. If you're struggling with mindfulness, which just means kind of being present in the moment, right? It'll give you strategies to help overcome what's challenging you. You can set reminders. So another helpful app is Mindfulness Coach. And then the virtual hope box. And I like this one because there are, like, in a way, one strategy to deal with anxious thoughts is distraction, right? So there's puzzles on there, photo puzzles, word searches, and then there's breathing exercises, guided muscle relaxation, guided meditations. And what's kind of cool about this, if your kid or you is already seeing a counselor, or if you're a counselor, you can pull up the app and kind of look at some options for homework. And then they can go do the things. And when the visit with the counselor happens again, you can kind of review, like, how did that go? How was that for you? So it's a nice way to reinforce some coping strategies. Okay, this is my contact info.